Welcome to Project Homestock. This is episode 1 from the Detailers Collective, a City Skylines 2 collaborative series, the lineup of which I'll run through with you in just a moment. This project has been in the pipeline for over 3 months. The brainchild of Canadian Moose Plays, this series will showcase detailed builds from some of your favourite creators, and it's going to be built on the outstanding map from the super talented Poplar Ponderosa. His Homestock map was created specifically for this series. Heavily influenced by Stockholm, Sweden, this map consists of a number of islands, mountainous backdrops, and lots of opportunities for interesting infrastructure and pockets of urban development. Poplar has already created spectacular connections with his combined road and rail bridge, and I want to really expand on that today. I'm going to be building out new external connections, and where exactly those connections are going to lead, well, you're just going to have to watch to the end to find out. You can play on this map if you want to as well. It's available on PDX mods. I'll leave a link below for you to check it out. And as the city grows, we're planning on sharing the game saves with you guys too. So if you want to build along, or you just want to have a closer look at the builds, then you will be able to. Now, let me introduce the lineup for the Detailers Collective. This bit is exciting. So first up, we have the Chief Organiser and Master Detailer, Canadian Moose Plays. Next up, we have Scunthorpe's favourite son, the ever-inventive Sonny Scunny. And completing the Canadian contingent, we're going to be treated to the talent and creativity of the great Tim Eister. Back to the UK for the next name on the roster, and we have the exceptionally gifted detailing skills of Few Candy to look forward to. And completing this lineup of legends is none other than the unstoppable creative force that is Infrastructurist. I know, yep, that's me as well. Personally, I couldn't be more excited and honoured to join this group of creators. This time last year I was putting some of my first videos out and I was watching all of these folks and just trying to learn what I could from them. So to be able to work together and create something with them is truly special, and I cannot wait to see what everyone comes up with. For everyone involved, I'll leave a link to the YouTube channel, so if you're not following them already, go and do that. In addition to all that talent, we're looking to invite guest builders to work their magic on the map as well. So stay tuned and we'll update you when we can. So we're on to a winner with the map, and we're on to a winner with the lineup. And I'll tell you who else is a winner: our channel sponsor, Instant Gaming's giveaway winner, Cardona Gamer. Cardona snagged a free copy of Red Dead Redemption 2 in November's giveaway. Giveaway for December's open now if you want to get involved. Instant Gaming provides a huge discount on games as well as wallet top-ups. Games of every genre are covered. I'll leave a link for both the site and the giveaway below. If you are in the market for picking up a new game, purchasing through that affiliate link is one of the best ways to support the channel, and continued success with it will enable me to directly spend more time making content like this. Okay, on to the build. The main inspiration behind today's build comes from two sources: the Øresund Bridge connecting Denmark and Sweden, as well as the Shenzhen-Shoshang link. And both of these megastructures feature cross-sea highway bridges that enter land below sea level via an artificial tunnel entrance. I'm going to combine features from both structures today. For the main layout of the island, I'll be leaning heavily on the Chinese design, and for the bridge element, I'm going to be trying to create, to an extent, some of the features found on the Scandinavian structure. To give you an idea of the plan for the full build today, what I'm going to be doing is creating a development corridor. And the idea behind a development corridor is to open up previously underdeveloped areas to attract investment and drive economic growth. So if we're planning on building out some major urban construction, it sounds like the kind of infrastructure that we're going to need. I'm going to be connecting Poplar's excellent existing infrastructure to some brand new external connections, and I'll be adding a few interchanges along the way to give the rest of the guys some more options to build out from. Not that there's a lack of starting areas on the map anyway, Poplar has provided plenty of them in the base map. To get the shape of the island perfect, I used the image overlay mod by Algernon. It was by far and away the easiest way of getting the dimensions correct. Poplar has kindly provided me with an island that I can terraform here, so I am going to take advantage of that. I'm just going to level out the terrain and we'll get the roads just the way that we need them. You will see me draw out a secondary frame or an outside frame. This was going to be used to help me try and get some of the pillars consistent on the very outside edge of the island. Partway through the build I ditched that technique for something else. Obviously I will show you, we'll get to it a little bit later on in the video. But the frames nonetheless did come in handy, as I did use them to do the very front section. Using JK's Control-C mod I managed to get the outer curves on the frame just identical to the ones that are there already, so super useful, used it a ton in this build. In the end, it was apparent that this initial frame that I put out was just too far away from the main building, so I redid it with a frame that was much closer, and the idea here is to sink it down, and it should give us an entirely consistent drop of elevation from the main island into the sea. The entire reason for doing this is to give me a consistent slope that I can attach a network of pillars along around the outside. I'll get it all tidied up, get it all nice and close to the road, and then we can crack on with the next part of the build. The very first thing to do on the island is to get the tunnel sorted. I'm going to kick off things, getting the railway bridge in place. I'm going to bring it down and going to have a nice gentle slope. I'm going to bring it down to 13.75 or whatever it is, and then I'm going to repeat the process with the parallel roads on the highway. More than anything else, this part of the road needs to keep in one piece. So I'll be saving very regularly, and once we get on to creating the interchange basically, which is on this island, it's going to be really important that we don't mess up these bridges and mess up where they enter the ground. It just looks terrible and there's no way coming back, so we always have to come back a game save. So save regularly and save different games. With the main highway and railway termination point on the island sorted out, I really wanted to get the highway done and get a feel for how this is going to really sort of find its place in the map. I'm going to try and snake it and really just try and follow the terrain the best I can. I'll have a couple opportunities for some really big bridges here, as this map is perfect for it, of course. After deciding on the main location for the highway, we're going to tidy up the various different bits and pieces. We're going to use the road tools, we're going to add little bits of key wall and try and just create a nice smooth connection at each part of it. Time consuming process, but it does make quite a big difference when you have a quick look at the overview of what you've created. So get your curves smooth, get the highways tightly together, get key walls when you need them, connect the roads to ground level when you need them using the tools, and make the most of what you have at your fingertips. To get the final connection over to the island, I wanted to get an idea for heights and curves, so heights are obviously good there. That initial curve simply wasn't going to do, but really it was just to get the initial part in place. And you see me doing this loads and loads on previous videos. I want to try and get a nice complex curve here. This won't be the final form, of course. These aren't going to line up perfectly because the highways are really tightly together on that bridge. But if we can get the majority of it done, that is really what I'm after. And I think those curves look pretty good. Off camera, it did require quite a bit of adjustment. Again, as usual, where it doesn't look right, we're going to delete it and try it again. If it doesn't look right second time, we'll do the same. And then, if needs be, we'll try and use a little bit of move it magic, and we should hopefully be able to get those little kinks ironed out. So you might be looking at that thinking, hey, that bridge is looking pretty done, right? Absolutely not. That's just the start. So from here on, it's going to take about another 4 hours to get it finished, believe it or not. So lucky for you, you're not going to have to sit through 4 hours of me struggling to put a bridge together. What I'll do instead is I'll just show you the few bits and pieces and techniques and details that I used to create it, and hopefully you can pick up a few ideas of your own from it. So you saw me create a line of pillars and basically attach the two highways together at the very top. What I'm looking to do here is to really give the impression that this is all going to be one big structure, and that's the first part of the jigsaw. That's going to run the entire length of the bridge, and that will bind the top element of it together. I think it looks pretty good actually. Directly below it, I'm going to be running the railway. Now, it would have been nice if the railway just went in and we could draw it as one nice big continuous section, but unfortunately it's just not that easy. So you will see me try and draw in a bit of a curve, and then I'm going to try and fine adjust it. I want it right up against the pillars in the middle, underneath the highways, and I want to try and get it nice and smooth. So that's going to involve quite a lot of move it to get the elevations nice and smooth, and also the curves as well. So as I fine tune the nodes and the segments, the actual curvature of it will be messed up, so that needs to be fine adjusted, and we'll be using move it, both manipulation mode and the normal mode to do that. These techniques will be used right the way through the build from beginning to end, right up until the point where we're going to split things off over at the island. On the island, things went in really easily. The first highway went in perfectly. We just took our time and put in a little complex curve just so we get a little bit of curvature going in and out, and it looked pretty good. I'd love to say that the rail went in just as easy, but it did not. I tried this quite a few times to get it in, first time, and the game just wasn't having it, not having it at all. So yeah, as you can see, this, or a variation of this, was pretty much the result. So it was time to suck it up. We'll get cuboids, move it on the go again, and we'll just fine tune and manually get these connections smoothened out. Really, it's just a case of what we've done already on the bridge up until this point. And I'm not gonna lie, at this stage, I was really looking forward to getting that final highway connection in. This took a heck of a lot of time, and yeah, I was pretty much done with it by this point. The good news here is that the final highway went in really straight away. The bad news was, I really disliked it. The rail section is way off to the right here. It's not at all what I was looking for. I wanted it much more central. So there was only one thing left to do. I just went and deleted it and just did it again. Now, it obviously took quite a lot more time, but I really couldn't leave it in that state, and I think taking that extra time and getting it looking just the way I wanted was definitely the right call. That looks much better, doesn't it? Let's be honest. Still plenty of work to make it smooth in terms of curvatures, but I'm happy with the overhead look. When we're taking a look at the real life Orson Bridge, the bridge itself has really beefy pillars. I found a pretty good match on I think this is a Golden Gate bridge struts from the San Francisco DLC. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using this to provide the main support. The way that I'm going to position these is that the rail is basically going to sit on the ledge just below the main supporting pillars, and then the main supporting pillars on each side will support the highway. So this will give us a pretty good effect, and we can repeat the process right the way throughout the span of the bridge, right up until where we split the networks at the entrance of the island. I went and deleted all of the additional pillars, the default pillars that come with the highway that aren't required. That gives it a nice clean look, and we just simply don't need them. Where the network split at the island entrance, I went and continued the big thick pillars, and then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to keep the default ones on the highway, so we have a couple of different supports as we get to that particular part of the build. Just as we approach the island, there is going to be a bit of a gap between the big pillars and the rail. I didn't want that, so what I decided to do was to grab a few extra pillars. I'm just going to stack them right up on top of the big concrete pillars, and we're going to fill that gap. I guess we could have left it, but it would have just bugged me. I had to fill the gap. The final little detail that I wanted to get done on this bridge before moving on was getting the additional horizontal pillars reattached on the main highway itself. Now these come built in along with the default ones, and they disappear, or well rather I deleted them when I was replacing them with the thicker pillars. So it kind of bugged me. It wasn't really necessary. It was just one of these things that some of them had them, some of them didn't, and I really wanted to be really consistent throughout the span of the bridge. So put them all in place and then just shoved them into position. That was quite a lot of work. That is 4 hours condensed into 5 minutes. So let's have a quick scan over. That is looking pretty clean now. Happy with the curves. We've just extended the railway out on the outside there, and again you can have a quick look at how the corridor is coming together. Back on the island, it's time to get the road layout sorted out over here, and I'm going to draw out pretty much a circle using a couple of semicircles. This is going to give me the road layout for the top of the island, and it's also going to give me the start of the highway ramps at the bottom of the island here. I drew out a little rectangular frame just to get some guidelines so we can get some consistent ramps. And then throughout the build, and I'm going to cut a lot of this out, I'm just going to use the road tools, and we'll get the key walls, retaining walls and road directions sorted out as and when it's required. A big thank you to everybody in the last video who told me how to fix these shadows on retaining walls. Absolutely brilliant. I had been avoiding using these things for the longest time. Now the on-off ramps at the top here, I am going to redo them. I did draw them in by hand originally, but I found a much more consistent way to do it, and I'll show you that in just a second. So we're not off to a bad start here. That's pretty much the main outline of what we're looking to do. As per usual in this build, we've got plenty of move it to be done, plenty of terraforming to be done, and general tidying up to be done. And again, a lot of this stuff, I'll cut it out. You don't need to see every single bit of it. one thing that came in really useful was semicircles again. So I did decide to delete the lower sections and just redo them. Doing it this way was significantly better. And then what I wanted to do, just like the real life version, is I want to get these roads right up against them. They kind of look like key walls, but obviously we're just going to be using the retaining walls that we already have in place and making it really tight together. These final connections on the outside were incredibly difficult to get right. Super fiddly, absolute pain in the butt, and I was glad to get them finished. Even though I'm showing you just the end result here, you can kind of get an idea for some of the challenges that we get here as we try and push them together. So yep, super fiddly, but again, it's one of these things that if you're trying to get it symmetrical, well, as symmetrical as possible, you gotta spend the time. So we're looking good here. I went ahead and completed the rest of the roads off camera. Again, it was all pretty fiddly stuff and kind of boring to watch. So rather than watching that, let's have a quick scan through and we'll have a look at how this bridge panned out and the connections to the island. Now look at the backdrop there, those mountains are beautiful, aren't they? What a good job Poplar did. Alright, so I think we are ready to get some buildings on the go. I'm going to use the medical university assets here. Using these all together give us a pretty cohesive look on the building choice. Now there's no way I'm going to be able to do a like for like on the real version, but I think this is pretty much as close as I could get. Now these buildings will be non-functional, but I am going to be making them as functional as possible, and I'll show you what I did just in a minute or two. I think using this big asset here at the tip of the island gives an almost sort of nautical theme, I guess, when we're putting them together. Kinda looks like a ship's bow, I think. And now I think we can get a real feel for how things are going to look once we have a few more buildings. So I completed it with the last of the medical university, and I think that gives an adequate grand entrance to the whole development. Now if I can remember correctly, the real life one does host events like concerts and all that kind of stuff, so what I decided to do really here was to essentially bring it to life and give it plenty of interest. So I am going to add a few extra buildings, and again these are just the non-functional ones for the time being. So I used the big car park, I used the power station I believe, and what I'm looking for here is just some cylindrical objects that I can sort of base a building around. I could have used two of the car parks of course, but I really did want them to have their own individual look and feel. The mod to get buildings that you can sink into the ground is StarQ's Vanilla Ploppables. He's got several versions of them. He's got the zone buildings, service buildings, and up to now he's got the French and a German pack as well. Over to the right hand side of our main island, I created a small temporary one just so I could get this bit of detail in place as well. I need some flat ground and I'm going to lay out some net lanes. I want to give our tunnel entrance and exit a bit of a canopy, so the way I'm going to do this is simply just draw out some net lanes. We're going to get them all nice and tight together using the invisible car park as a bit of a guideline, and then we're just going to shift it over with move it again and just shift it into position. Now this would look great if I could have sunk it down. It also would have looked really good if I could have curved it up, but yeah, just keeps popping into place. What can you do? But I think that looks pretty decent. It gives a nice canopy, something you maybe don't see all the time. So after spending all the time doing all of that fiddly little work on the bridges and the roads, I thought it's time for a change of pace, and I'll concentrate on getting the highway done and getting a couple of interchanges sorted out. So I needed to connect the railway from the island over to Poplar's starting area, and I just wanted a nice smooth connection running through the map. So when we're placing this and we hit some raised area, Anarchy will in fact cut out some embankments on the map. I'll kind of smooth them out at some points and every now and again bring the rail networks into the ground, as you can see here. I've also created a big tunnel. I thought there's just too many bridges on the go. I thought a tunnel would be a nice change of pace down towards the middle side of the map. Over at the existing train connections, I created a basic sort of Y-shape interchange here on the rail network. Spent quite a bit of time making all the connections smooth with the retaining walls and the key walls, and it came out looking really nice actually. Here you can see where the tunnel starts, and this is basically going to be the point where I would like to make the first interchange. So it's an EU map and an EU theme. That doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to be keeping just EU builds, but I'd like to make the first interchange an EU one. Going to make a basic diamond with roundabouts, and we'll do some detailing on this to make it look a bit better later on. One thing I did have to do here was just to take the off-ramp from the island direction down and under the highway, and we're going to snake it back over to the other side in just a minute. I thought it was just a little bit too tight to the rail, and I didn't want to try and shoehorn it really where the space isn't there. These connections coming off the elevated highway, I've made my peace with it. It's one of the things in the game that can't really be fixed, so a little bit of slight jankiness on some of the railings. I'm just past caring about it now. I'm just going to go for it. I'd rather have that smoother ramp on the actual road element part of it rather than worrying too much about the rails. So I created a couple of identical roundabouts either side. I'm going to hook these in with a single lane highway on each side. And this road underneath is basically just going to connect the two. I'll need to upgrade it to a 2-lane in just a moment. Now, when we add these little single roads on and off the roundabout, gives us some really nice detailing options later on. Always looks pretty good, and it keeps the flow of the traffic going pretty good as well. I'm not going to hook this up to anything really. I'm just going to have a couple of roads heading off into the wilderness, and the rest of the builders, when they pick this up, if they want to build out from it, great. Now, as I said, this isn't quite the finished article, but that really is just showing you the basic road layout of it. Obviously, some of these curves are going to need a bit of work. I think that big ramp that weaves under the highway in a couple of places, that needs to be brought in a little bit tighter. But yeah, as a sort of general idea, that's pretty much what we're looking at to kick things off. And the next spot that I'm going to use is this one here, where we've created a bit of a bridge section on the dual highways. So down here I think is going to be a pretty good spot for a DDI, or a Diverging Diamond interchange. The first Diverging Diamond interchange was in fact an EU one. It was in France, built in the 1970s in Versailles in fact, so you get most of these now in North America, but they're pretty cool. They are fairly high capacity service interchanges, and they work really well in the game despite not being able to time the traffic lights. So dead easy. We just run a parallel road, click and unclick, make sure that the gap is the same. Here I'm using 56 meters, and then you just carry on with the parallel road, and you can make it look nicer. We just grab some of the nodes and we just stretch them out and grab some of the segments, we'll move it, and we just give a little bit of a curve, and we'll continue to finesse that and make it look a little bit better. You can obviously use manipulation mode if you want. I've just gone ahead and created some ramps with the terraforming, and it's always super simple. You just bring the ramp down to the point really towards the middle of the X or the cross, and then you just grab a couple of single roads and you just feed them into the direction of traffic. We'll get that done real quick. There we go. And that's basically a DDI. I do like adding an extra lane on here. It does help traffic out. There's a little bit less weaving. And well, yeah, that's pretty much it. Good to go. I think in terms of traffic lights, just keep the traffic lights on the actual main crosses. So there's 2 of them crosses. I tend to just get rid of the traffic lights everywhere else, and things tend to move pretty quickly. So much like the diamond with roundabouts that we did earlier on, I'm just going to hook up and give people an opportunity to build off it later on. There will be some detailing to be done later for sure, but I'm just going to tidy up a few things, make sure the direction of traffics are correct. I'll get a few of the curves in a little bit better the way I want, and I'll remove all of the walkways that aren't really required. So for pedestrian access, they'll just be able to walk directly through the middle of the interchange. They just use the traffic lights to move from A to B safely. Now, as I was doing the interchanges, my mind was still racing about what I'm going to do on this island, and I know that the Chinese version of this one has got a helicopter port, or a helicopter pad I should say rather, and It's on one of the little circular buildings that we have here to the right, but really what I wanted to do was see if we can try and get one active. And what I decided to do was to grab one of the new police stations and see if we could situate it within the main building. And height-wise, it worked just fine. It is poking out a little bit, but we're going to kind of disguise that a little bit later on the video. But once this is up and running, this should be a functional heliport, and that'll be pretty cool. I didn't get too far into building this, of course. This is only episode 1, so I'll be interested to see if we get a bit of action on that later on. It should look really, really good. A real striking design feature of the Chinese build is its big key walls that it has, and it basically envelops the whole development in the kite shape. So super tricky. It did take a good number of hours to get this done, and I used a couple of different techniques to do it. So here on the straight edges at the front, I just sort of laid them out and then used Move It to kind of shift them into place just along the ground. And that's pretty much the technique I used for the front 2 sections. So nothing too difficult, but as you keep adding things on, it just gets harder and harder to grab the nodes that you want. Now, the problem doing it this way is that when you look really, really close, you'll see that the steps, if you like, they're a little bit inconsistent in terms of height and in terms of the space or the gap horizontally, from each one. But that said, the front part of it was probably the easiest part, and it's not really surprising given that it's straight edges. I used exactly the same technique on the other side and just created another straight line. What I did here to grab the heights, I simply used the ones that were already built on the first section, and that means that when we get to come to tidy things up and get rid of these excess pillars, we should have everything at exactly the same level, exactly the same height, and we should, in theory, be able to get some pretty clean looking corners on this thing. I did initially try and use the same technique on the curved sections, and quite honestly it was just taking forever. What I decided to do here was to use Ctrl+C, and what I did was I copied the road first of all, I pasted it onto a little island next door, and then what I did was traced out the curvature with the pillars. Once I had the curvature, I then copied them again, pillars themselves, and I copied, I think it's 8 of them in a row on the main island where I want to put them in place. Now once I have them in place, obviously I terraformed and brought the ground out here as you can see on the video. All we needed to do then was to really just grab the individual pillars and then sink them into the ground, and it means that the gap or the spacing, if you like, horizontally is pretty much set. It does look quite a bit better, and it's way easier than trying to shift it in place with Move It. And the issue when you grab all of these nodes is that, and it's probably related to the game more than anything else, you really lack the fine tuning on the rotation. So rather than rotating a degree or so, it kind of jumps a few degrees, and it's super hard to really get the precision that you need to get these things in place. So this technique, just flatten the whole thing out past your main frame, get all the lining up done, and then just get the heights done afterwards, and the ground will be pushed down, as you can see here, along with the pillars when you do your height work. So by far and away, 100%, that is the way to do it if you're giving anything like this a crack yourself. So it's the same idea. We are just going to go ahead and delete all the stuff that we don't need. That looks really satisfying getting the water in, doesn't it? That was a good point. I can tell you I was happy. I thought the end was near here. Now what we'll obviously need to do is just tidy up these corners. Now depending on the angles that you have on any of the sides, really, your mileage might vary in terms of how clean a corner that you're going to get. But again, unless you're zooming right in for a super close look, you're really not going to notice little imperfections on these things. They look good even from, sort of medium close distance. And as we get the final few in, we can have a look. And yeah, it looks pretty clean. We might have a rogue pillar here, but the actual corners themselves, yeah, not bad effort. At the very rear of the island, you might be wondering what the hell I'm doing sinking buildings in here. Yeah, it took forever. I tried retaining walls, I tried putting in the, you know, the wall props. I tried paths, I tried roads, I tried all sorts of stuff. In the end, sinking some prop buildings worked perfectly. These are the, I can't remember if these are the French or the German ones, but what I was looking for was just a big, plain, white wall that I can sink into the ground and try and tidy up once it's in. And this is the best one that I landed on. So a few pillars over the top. We'll just make sure everything's sunken in to make sure we can't see the roofs, and then we'll add a little bit of vegetation and we'll just kind of hide some of the jankiness. So same idea as the front corners. We're just gonna pull the pillars in, tidy things up a little bit. Again, we'll just use that little wall and we will tidy that in. I forgot to do that earlier on. Same idea here, we'll just sink it into the ground. Make sure you've got your elevation lock on if you are doing it this way. And there we go, we can just hide a little bit of jank. Perfect. So on the back, I did use the wall assets from the French pack, and just going to use move it and just shift these things in. Or not move it, the transform tool rather. Quite fiddly using these things, to be honest. It's a little bit of a pain, but after a fair bit of trial and error, this was pretty much best I could come up with. It's not perfect. I don't actually mind the difference in the colours, actually, to be honest. I don't think it looks too bad. But yeah, that is the end bit done. And I think that looks sharp enough, you know. Now the final bit of infrastructure that we need to do in terms of the roads is actually hook this up to the map. So I'm going to do a trumpet, going to do a big old trumpet here in fact, and we'll try and make it look nice and tidy. I'm going to just use a 2-lane trumpet here as we go around the main loops, and we'll use some of the tools. And again, I want to try and keep the roads nice and tight. They always look pretty good. So we'll give the extra lanes first, run them in, a little bit of lane maths there, keep things running, and then we'll give a few merging ramps as well. Pretty straightforward. Again, we got a nice little curve going over the railway here. That was not a nice transition from the main highway, so we rebuild that, and no, still not going to do. Let's get that done again. Sweet, perfect. Very, very simple trumpet interchange. That does look spectacular on this map though, doesn't it? Fantastic. Now on this build, I want to try and bring this island to life. I want to give it lots and lots of activity. So essentially what I'm going to be doing here is really creating a small town in its own right. The real life one, the buildings on that are very much just used for services. So, you know, there's a rescue centre and, you know, a highway department or whatever it is, you know, on their island. For this island, I just want everything that you would find in a small town in this tiny little area. And the way that I'm going to do it, and you probably saw this one coming anyway when I did the police station, is that I'm just going to hide the buildings in the prop buildings. Very, very simple, straightforward. You literally just plop them in, and what you need to do is just shift them about and make sure that they're hidden, or at least mostly hidden anyway. The really important one that we're going to need here is the fire station. Obviously, if something burns down, it is a pain in the hoop to try and find the right asset to bring it back in. So that's going to be the first thing that I'm going to put in. Medical centre, of course, will keep the Sims happy and will keep them healthy. And it, as I say, it's just a case of finding the right assets to hide them. To provide electricity, I'm going to create a offshore wind farm. It will look pretty good with it in the backdrop from the island. And for water, just a simple water tower. We're not going to have a huge amount of population on here, but you know, I think a water tower or two will do the trick. Now that medical clinic was just a little bit too big, it was sticking out, so I'm just going to slot it in here. And to deal with the sewage, I am going to use the big water facility as well. Now just thinking ahead, I didn't want my fellow builders having to deal with some stinking water pollution, so this is a nice solution, and we can get it kind of not quite blended in, but we can have it as a complementary part of the development as well, and an extra bit of the medical facility does help with that too. It looks alright, that, doesn't it? So we'll remove the water branding, and that should look the part. And we get plenty of commercial in here, and we've got lots of space to fit these guys in. Now the nice thing about the commercial, and it wasn't planned, was that that particular building changes colour. So actually once the buildings are in and they're occupied, we're going to get an extra splash of colour on here as well. I think it's quite easy with these big developments to really sort of make it all look very grey, and I wanted this to be different. I wanted to stick my own mark on this one as well, so it's going to be quite a bit different from the real life one. I think that's not too bad of a start there. You'd never guess all of that stuff was there. Well, let's remove some of this branding and that'll look a little bit better. One thing I did forget to do, those big circular buildings that you see at the bottom right of the screen, I forgot to go and hide the small commercials in there. So I did plan on doing it, completely forgot. It will give us that extra bit of life and activity as well. So I'll be picking it up in the next episode whenever it comes back round to me, and I will be doing that, or maybe one of the other guys can do it for me. So here we should be able to fit a decent amount of high residential and medium density residential as well. Again, pretty much shoehorned it in there. We'll just adjust the heights on them and it should be pretty well hidden. The other thing I thought about is that if they level up, they're going to start poking out the top as well. So again, I might ask somebody just to go in there and lock the building levels. For the education, I'm going to stick with an elementary school for now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretty much remove all of the prop work that goes with it. The plan for this building is really to convert it into like an outdoor restaurant or eating area, and that's exactly what I'll be doing. We've got a ton of detail in here, and what I'll do is I'll run through some of the considerations I had in mind when I was doing it. So really I wanted to make this thing a destination in its own right, but also while I was doing that, I did want to try and make things just a little bit easier for the next builder. So by having all of these services in, it's potentially just one less thing that they need to worry about. That said, they might end up building out on the opposite side of the map, but at least they'll have the police coverage though. I think that big tower, it just looked a little bit out of place. I think the scale of it was just a little bit too much. The more I looked at it, the less I liked it. So I decided to rip it out and we replaced it with a wind turbine. I actually had a wind turbine in at the very beginning, and the reason I had that in is that one of the promotional photos that I found for this development actually had a wind turbine in it. So obviously that get ditched somewhere along the design process, but I thought it was a pretty nice addition. I think it actually was a better fit for the build. Now, one thing I would note is that although I've put residential in here, I don't want to give any impression that people actually live here. I just want them active and I want the numbers in, I want the population in. So I am going to keep that well hidden. I want this all to be very much, commercial and maybe a little bit of industrial potentially as well, but mainly commercial is really what I'm trying to go for here. I'm not going to be using any dirt decals of any description here. I want this to be absolutely shiny, brand new, and that's exactly what I'll be going for. So I think once we get all of the different decals and some of the vegetation work and all the rest of it in here, I think it's given almost a type of like Dubai type feel, but on some major Chinese infrastructure and then served by a European bridge, which kind of sounds nuts, but that's kind of what I'm going for. Speaking of the bridge, I would have liked to create, where the ships go under, I would have liked to create like a suspension type bridge or a cable stayed bridge, but because of the curvature in the bridge itself, it just wasn't going to be possible. The assets that we have in the game are completely straight, so they would have just been sticking out. It didn't look good. I did try, so it was a little shame. I did like that, and perhaps maybe we would get some options as assets get added to the game. But for now, I'm pretty happy with the overall look of it. I think it looks pretty sweet. So I'm going to crack on with the time lapse. I'll let that run for a few minutes, and I will catch up with you shortly. So obviously earlier in the video we got these interchanges in place, and really I just kind of scooted through them as quick as possible. So I'm going to come back here, and as you can see I'm just going to try and make things look a little bit nicer. Super simple in terms of detailing. I'm just going to add some surface work in the gaps and in the main roundabout itself. I'm going to use the net lanes here to try and get some nice sort of web effect on the outside of the roundabouts. So it's just a case of drawing the curves with the net lanes, using the bucket tool with the surface, and then just filling them in. The surface tool isn't quite perfect, it will leave little gaps just at the corners, so you need to go in there and just extend them out, but yeah, pretty nice. And then I'm going to use the old roundabout trick, and we're going to just add a little bit of cheat and detail in there. Very simple. Get them recolored, and then add a little bit of vegetation, and I am going to give each of the roundabouts a safety barrier on there as well, and that's just a key wall. The normal bushes do the job here, then I'm going to sink the palm trees into the ground. So one thing that I tend to do in a lot of my builds is that I will lock the vegetation. So that's a setting in the game, and I think if we're passing the game save between us, that's a setting that can get lost and stuff can get overgrown, I reckon, very, very easily. It would be a real pain to try and track that particular setting between 5 of us. So I've just went and used the full size one, and then I just sink it into the ground, and it still gives us a pretty nice effect. Down at our DDI, I'm just going to use some of solid surfaces down here, just the dirt ones, and then where we see the gaps, I'm just going to fill that in with a bit of vegetation. I don't want the decal, the surface rather, shown on the road above. So that's it. Simple surface work, a little bit of vegetation, we're good to go. So one really, really nice Easter egg that Poplar has done on his map here is that he's provided obviously external connections, but he's named them and he's given them actual destinations, and each of the destination goes to different creators that have their own series on YouTube. So there's Kokai by Overcharged Egg, we've got Port Moose by Canadian Moose, we've got one from my city, Cape Lomond, we've got City Planner Plays with Magnolia County. There's lots of these and I don't want to spoil them all for you. If you want to go and find them yourself, go download the map, go have a look. It is quite fun seeing where they go. And the nice thing is that when we connect these external connections, they are going to go from one of these cities to the other. So that's going to be one of my final jobs here today, is to basically name where these tunnels are going to go. So I'm going to name these after somebody who's given me a shout out on their community tab on their YouTube more than once, and I do appreciate them using the platform to try and give my content a push. It's very, very much appreciated. So I'm going to be naming this after Biffa's UK city, Kettlewick. So it's just a small way of showing a little bit of appreciation, and I'm kind of hoping that Kettlewick is going to benefit from the new economic ties to Homestuck. So if you made it this far, fair play to you. It was a big one today, but I think it was worth the effort, and I really wanted to push the boat out and kick off this series with a bit of style. I'm going to be passing the baton on to Sonny Scunny. He's started on his episode already, so I am really looking forward to seeing what he's cooking. And I know Moose has been busy with a few ideas of his own as well, so really, really looking forward to seeing all of that. Don't forget to go and follow the rest of the guys. Obviously, they'll be posting as and when their episodes are ready. And thanks once again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring the channel. I'm going to leave it there. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.